This is the Warriors of Chaos Army book for Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, otherwise known as your direct passport for crushing your foes, eviscerating your opponents, and flattening all those who stand in the way of the Chaos Gods. Yes, I know Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition is a dead game and hasn't been supported for about 6 years, but it doesn't matter because this is an excellent army book full of excellent troop types. In this video, what I just wanted to do was talk in some considerable depth about all of the troop types that are in this army book, all the special characters, all the magic items, everything in here, based on my pretty considerable experience now of playing this army over a considerable number of years, probably playing around 110, 120 battles, with some considerable competitive success in recent times. If you're interested in getting into Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, yeah, I know it's a dead game and you fancy like playing Warriors of Chaos, they're always a popular army, and perhaps this video might be interesting or useful to you. Or if you've got some models under the bed or something and are fancying having a little sally out in the name of Khorne or the name of Nergal, then perhaps this video might be useful to you likewise. As to why I'm really making this video, well, it's because Slaanesh told me, and What? Talking about, mate? Sorry, this is my demon prince again. He's very, very, very vocal. You might have seen him in another video. Hey, what do you want? You got a message for me? You have a message from Slaanesh? Oh, really? He's been talking to you again, has he? I thought he wasn't answering your messages. So Slaanesh says, don't make the video. Well, why? Why on earth wouldn't we want to make a video helping other Chaos players, whether Slaanesh or Chaos Divided, crush the enemies of the Chaos Gods? Why? Because if we give away all our secrets, then they might beat us. You selfish bastard! Is that really all that you've got to concern yourself with? Look, be gone with you. Bugger off. Go away to the red light district and go and play with your hedonistic, X-rated things that would be banned in Age of Sigmar. Anyway, let's get on to some of the substance here. Now, in general, the Warriors of Chaos in 8th edition Warhammer Fantasy, and this is what this video is about, I should say. It's about 8th edition, which is the last sort of officially supported version of Warhammer Fantasy. There are other, obviously, older editions. Chaos have been, around right going back into, 3rd edition, and indeed arguably before that as well. But in 8th edition, the last version of Warhammer Fantasy that supported Warriors of Chaos are a high-tier army, probably in the top 3 or 4 armies in the game. Loads of different things in here that are competitive. There's stuff that's competitive, even if you play the more kind of basic vanilla kind of stuff like Warriors of Chaos or Juggernauts, or if you get funky with some of the special characters, there's a lot of very competitive stuff in here. There's also a lot of really, really bad stuff, which you can absolutely play if you're playing fluffy kind of games, or you just simply want to play with the models that you've got. But there's definitely a big standard deviation between stuff that is amongst the best stuff in the game and stuff that's pretty bad. And so that's why I think a general army list review is quite useful. So let's open this blackened tome and get into the analysis. So you should absolutely read all about the fluff, all about the times of woe and the coming of chaos and the slaves to the darkness. Oh yes, don't forget about that. A call back there to the seminal Slaves to the Darkness and Lost and the Damned army books of the late 1980s, where the Chaos Army had a total of around 700 pages of rules and D1000 demon mutation tables and demonic sword tables and all of that kind of stuff that was lost in the apparently simpler time that was the late 1980s. It was actually a lot more complicated, but anyway, never mind about that. So, the army special rules first. First one you've got to bear in mind is the eye of the gods. The gods looking with their eye at your Chaos champions to see if they are worthy for some additional mutation powers, or to be turned into a Chaos spawn if they annoy them, or to become a demon prince. Like, what's his name? He's just disappeared. So the main thing with the the Eye of the Gods rule is that it can be a real disadvantage to you because your characters are amongst the best things that you've got. You've got some of the hardest characters in the game. Obviously, you're Chaos. You have the reputation for that. Now, there are some things that can still beat you up, so don't get too arrogant about it. But the Eye of the Gods rule means you have to challenge or you have to accept a challenge if you can. So most combats that are opening up with you, you're going to be having to say, I challenge you. And it's either going to be, you know, your big Chaos Lord that challenges or your unit champion that challenges, if you can't got someone that challenges. Now, a couple of things with this. Bear in mind that this can be dangerous because it means that your wizard has to issue challenges and has to accept challenges, which is awful because even though your wizard's a bit tougher than normal wizards, he's still a wizard and he's still going to get his ass kicked in a challenge by most things. Also, challenges are as gimmicky as hell in 8th edition. Because that model gets taken out of combat and other models then lose their base-to-base contact with other things around it, bear in mind that can sometimes cause things not to fight. And so you can be in some potentially very gimmicky situations, you know, if you have to accept challenges and then that blocks out other things. So bear in mind some of those challenge rules. You can get into some silly situations there sometimes. Now, the actual Eye of the Gods table itself. You roll 2d6. If you kill a character in combat, including a unit champion, and your unit champions do this too, anyone with the Eye of the Gods rule, who is almost all your characters, or if you kill a monster, roll on the Eye of the Gods table. 2d6 or 3d6 if you've got a war shrine within 12, picking the best two, which is very useful. Stuff that you get, well, you can be turned into a Chaos Spawn. Not good, that's not what you want, obviously. Or you can get a bunch of stuff. You can get +1 toughness, +1 strength, +1 attack. You know, really useful sort of stuff that makes your Chaos Champions even better than they already are. Bear in mind there is a little bit of sort of an over-munchkin effect with this. Your Chaos characters are probably better than everyone else's anyway, and are probably going to be able to do most of the things you want them to do combat-wise. And so, you know, an extra attack, an extra toughness might not make that much of a difference, you know, in a battle that might only last 4 or 5 turns, for example. So do bear in mind it's... you know, it might not have the effect that you think. You can also get turned into a Demon Prince by rolling the Dark Apotheosis effect if you pass a leadership test. Now, this obviously is absolutely fantastic if it's a unit champion, because your 25-point unit champion gets replaced with a 400-point Demon Prince, which is obviously amazing. Now, if you've already got like a Mega Chaos Lord or something like that, and he gets turned into a Demon Prince, you know, it doesn't necessarily make as much difference as you might think. You know, some of his stats might go up a bit, but, you know, he's already great as a Chaos Lord, he's great as a Demon Prince. It probably doesn't matter as much as you might think. So it's the most powerful when it happens on a unit champion or a low-level wizard or something like that. You get a Demon Prince out of it. And so, you know, that's something that will feature in some of your games, the Eye of the Gods. Then you've got the Marks of Chaos. Most of the pieces in your army can pick a Mark of Chaos. Not like in the old days where it could only be your Chaos characters. Now even like a Chariot, Marauder Horseman, those things can have Marks of Chaos. And they all do the same things on all the troop types in the book, with the exception of a couple being slightly different for the Demon Prince specifically. That's not a very important distinction. So Mark of Khorne, first and foremost. Frenzy, +1 attack. That's obviously very, very good. You know, it gives you already very, very killy warriors even more killing power. Makes you immune to psychology as well. Useful. You know, some of your stuff's only got leadership 8. You know, might be useful. But you also, as a frenzied piece, you can be baited, which is to say, if you can charge, which is to say that if your Juggernauts are 19 inches away from the opponent, which is to say if they roll a double 6 on their charge range, they have to take a leadership test to restrain themselves. If they fail it, they have to declare a charge, even if it's a really silly charge that goes through dangerous terrain, that they're never going to make anyway, etc. They also, in addition to that, they have to pursue if they beat an opponent in combat, and they have to overrun if they wipe someone out on the charge. The last thing there is very important. Expect a clever opponent to stick a light cavalry unit in front of your frenzied guys, maybe angled at a certain angle as well. You either have to charge him, or you don't use your unit, and that's assuming you pass your frenzy test. And if you do, you then have to overrun straightforward like an absolute lemon. And if your opponent's been clever enough to do that, they are not going to put targets in your way to overrun it to. So your Juggernauts are going to find themselves overrunning somewhere, probably with their flanks sticking out where he can charge something into you. So be careful here. This is why I think you don't see huge amounts of frenzy in very high tier games, because they're very easy to bait. But some troop types like Juggernauts are so good anyway that they can use their frenzy. So frenzy, a real double-edged sword. It's a nice rule. I really like the way it works. It's got some good, some bad. Mark of Tzeentch gives you +1 ward save. Now, this is a strong ability. because it stacks with other things. It can stack with a parry save for your Tzeentch warriors, giving them a 5-up ward, or with a big character who's already got, say, a 4-up ward from the Talisman of Preservation, stacking to 3-up. 3-up rerolling ones if you give him the 3rd Eye of Tzeentch. Thus begins one of the several things in this book, which is going to lose you friends if you use it. So yep, Tzeentch really good in certain contexts. Nergal. Nergal is probably the most popular single mark in 8th edition. It always is +/-1 to hit you. That might not sound like much, but it's a really big deal. Plus consider some of your stuff has already got very high weapon skill. Demon Prince of Nergal has got weapon skill 9. That means that most things are probably going to need 6s to hit that guy. Really, really difficult. Even with Chaos Warriors, you've got weapon skill 5. So that means goblins are hitting you on 6s. You've got something like Melkoths in your army, or Nergal magic, Miasma of Pestilence. Knock down your opponent's weapon skill a bit. If you can knock it down to 2 or less, he's hitting your Chaos Warriors on 6s, and he's not going to be killing many of them with that. Very, very good, the Mark of Nergal. Really no downsides. Then finally, Mark of Slaanesh. It makes you immune to fear, terror, and automatically passes your panic test and immune to fear. That's not the same as immune to psychology. Immune to psychology just means that you automatically pass all those tests, but you can't run away. Whereas this, Mark of Slaanesh, allows you to run away because you are just immune to all of the separate components of immune to psychology, but not immune to psychology itself. And so this means that your Marauder Horse, your Hellstriders can run away, which is absolutely fantastic on a light unit. Light units, the kind of ones you might use for chaffing your opponent, getting in the way of him, or going to hunt his war machines down. Your fast cavalry will probably be on a flank. It will probably be operating away from your main centre of gravity if your general there, or your BSB is in the middle. So very often they panic if they get shot. But your Slaanesh guys are not going to be panicking because of their Mark of Slaanesh, which is absolutely fantastic, and they've still got the flexibility to flee if they need to. Slaanesh on other like bigger blocks of infantry and things, quite frankly, they should be absolutely fine anyway, and so I wouldn't bother taking that instead of one of the other marks. Also, I should say there's Chaos Armour as well. That's just a sort of a superior form of armour that your army gets, basically the same as plate armour, and wizards can wear it too. Onto Lord choices now. The Chaos Lord. Well, your workaday Chaos Lord, with the vintage going right back to the beginning of Chaos in the 1980s. Yeah, he's good. I mean, he's got a very good stat line, pretty much the same as what he used to have back in the day. Weapon skill 8, strength and toughness 5, 5 attack, 7 initiative, and leadership 9. He is not going to disappoint anyone. You've got a wide variety of mount choices with him. He can go on a Chaos Steed, he can go on a Demon Steed, he can go on a Juggernaut, he can go on a Disc, he can go on a Steed of Slaanesh, he can go on a Palanquin of Nergal, he can go on a Chaos Dragon. He has got a lot of options. Now, you could run him as an infantry lord. He could go in a unit of Chaos Warriors. I'm not a fan of that personally because I think your Chaos Warrior unit's already pretty killy as it is. Having a Lord in there with his extra 5 or 6 attacks, yeah, it makes it a bit better, but it's not going to really change the unit completely as far as your opponent is concerned, even though you're going to have a very expensive character in there. And a Cavalry unit, that's probably a bit stronger. Although do bear in mind you'll have to have 5 rank or far models in there to stop him being cannoned off. That's 5 rank or far models, guys, not including standard bearer, infantry, musician or champion. You can have him on a disc. If he's Tzeentch, that's very strong. You can have the 3rd Eye of Tzeentch, rerolling 1s with 3-up ward. He's almost unkillable, basically. But at the same time, his damage output is still very impressive. But yeah, you can use him like that. You could give him the Crown of Command as well to make him stubborn for an absolutely disgusting kind of piece. And you could put him on a dragon. I don't really recommend that. Monster and Rider are very vulnerable to being cannoned because they both get hit by the cannon in this iteration of the rules. So generally you will not see a Chaos Lord riding a dragon that much. It's also so many on one model that's just vulnerable to a spell. It's really a bit suboptimal. Chaos Lord, perfectly okay, not going to disappoint anyone, but I don't think he is as good the Demon Prince, who we'll come on to in a minute. Your next Lord choice is the Chaos Sorcerer Lord. So he's your basic standard wizard. He's a level 4 wizard. He can pick from the chaos magic of the gods, Tzeentch, Slaanesh, or Nergal. Khorne doesn't have wizards, of course. Or he can pick fire if he's unmarked, which is probably, I think, the weakest of the 8 college laws. Or he can pick shadow if he's Slaanesh, metal if he's Tzeentch, and death if he is Nergal. Now, death is the strongest of the law of these, arguably the strongest of the 8 college decks, or amethyst magic as it used to be called in old days, old money, because he's got the purple sun if he's got that, and some other rather good spells. So that's going to be very popular. Shadow, I don't really rate for Chaos Warriors. It's a great lore, don't get me wrong, but it's full of buffs and debuffs. You know, Occam's Mind Razor on Chaos Warriors versus Occam's Mind Razor on some High Elf Spearmen. There's not really much competition as to what the comparative advantage really is there. As for debuffs, look, your stuff's already better than his. You shouldn't really need that much more in the way of help, and you've not got any magic missiles in Shadow, and that's one thing that you lack, ways of destroying his chaff pieces that he's going to go and park in front of your juggernauts. I also find Shadow magic doesn't really tend to be that effective until about turn 3. So I don't really rate it that much. Metal, I think, has got a place. I guess it's good against other armor, but you've got a lot of high strength in your army already. There's a spell in there that also increases your armor save. That's nice for Chaos Warriors and a 3+. Some solid choices in there. Death is probably the preferable one, and also Slaanesh from the Chaos God ones. And we'll talk about the Chaos God laws actually at the end of this video. But the actual Sorcerer himself, well, he's got a slightly better stat line than most wizards. He's got a few more attacks, so he's not awful in combat. And he's got a 4-up armor save because he's got Chaos Armor, which is probably one of the better things about him. And you can put him on like a barded steed, give him a magic shield, and then you're starting to get up to maybe being able to have a 1-ups conventional save on your wizard, which is not something that most other mages of other races can have, which is definitely something nice, definitely something worth having. I think the problem with the Chaos Sorcerer, though, as a general choice, is 2 things. First, he's a bit overcosted because you pay a little bit more for having that extra premium in combat, and really, you don't want that on a wizard. You just want him to do his magic job and really to hell with his stat line. And so, comparatively, I think Chaos Sorcerers are a bit expensive compared to the wizards of other races. It almost feels like you're paying like a sort of a tax for something you don't need. The second problem with him is the Eye of the Gods, because while he's better than most wizards, he's still going to get his ass kicked in combat against most things, and he's going to have to challenge. If your infantry block, Chaos Warrior infantry block, goes into another infantry block, you're going to have to issue a challenge. So you're going to want to have a unit champion to go and do that before your Chaos Sorcerer has to go and be an absolute lemon and go and, finds himself fighting the enemy general or something like that. Really not what you want at all. But, he's still obviously, indispensable because he's your main source of magic. You've then got your Demon Prince. Oh, this is where it starts getting really good. The Demon Prince has got a better stat line than the Chaos Lord. He's got 1 more point in weapon skill. He's got 1 more point in strength. He's also got 4 wounds, and he's got a 5-up ward save built in. Plus, he's unbreakable. That's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. With the right combination of Chaos rewards, magic items, you can give him a 1-up armor save, scaly skin, Charmed Shield and Chaos Armor. That's a 1-up armor save. And that's going to mean that he's going to be very well protected. He's going to have a 1-up armor save. He's going to 5-up ward. He's going to have a Charmed Shield, which can potentially stop a cannonball. And he's going to be unbreakable. You can also give him a reward called Soul Feeder, which means that if he rolls a 6 when he does a wound, an unsaved wound in close combat, he gets a wound back. So if you get your Demon Prince into combat, even if he takes a couple of wounds on the way from shooting, he's probably going to get them back in combat. He's probably not going to die. And because he's unbreakable, your opponent ain't going anywhere. And hopefully you can charge him with something else while your Demon Prince is doing that. Best place for a Demon Prince, absolutely in combat. And if you give him something like Slaanesh magic, he can continue casting magic pretty much in combat because he's got a lot of hex spells. The Demon Prince is really, really strong. He can also fly as well, which is very important. Causes terror, etc., etc. He's about 500 points, but he does the job of the Chaos Lord and the Wizard as well, because you can make him a level 4 Wizard. And that's really, really strong. Most of the time, you'll see a Demon Prince and Chaos Warrior armies rather than a Lord and a Sorcerer, because he's cheaper than both of them together, and arguably one of him is better than both of those. Your other Lords are special characters, which I will talk about in a minute, but let's go then on to heroes. The next hero you've got is the Exalted Hero, who is your standard hero, basically. But he's still pretty damn good. He's better than the Lord choices of a lot of other races. He's got Weapon Skill 7, so that means Weapon Skill 3 stuff's going to need 5 to hit him. He's got Strength 5 and he's got 4 attacks. He's really very, very strong. Obviously, he can carry the army's BSB, Battle Standard, which is generally where you're going to be seeing him in the army. As for the build he has, I find this one to be one of the more difficult builds, because there's a lot of different ways you could go. You could just have him as an infantry dude who goes in your Chaos Warrior unit. I don't tend to like playing like that because it's a sort of bit more all your eggs in one basket, but perfectly respectable. You can put him on a standard Chaos Steed, get him to a 1-up armor save very easily and very cheaply. Nice enough. You can put him on a disc. Well, that's strong for the same reasons. You can go for the 3-up rerolling 1 Zinch disc guy and probably get him his armor save up to 2-up quite easily too. Very, very nice. Very, very hard to kill. But still, not like an alpha grade combat piece. You can't throw him into an enemy main unit and expect him to, be able to beat that. You won't be able to do that. Well, my favourite of all the builds is a Demon Steed. So a Demon Steed gives him toughness 5 and 3 wounds. This is because with the monstrous cavalry, you take the toughness and the wounds of the cavalry bit. And that means that he's getting 1 more toughness than he would otherwise have had and 1 more wound than he had. Whereas a Chaos Lord, who already has toughness 5 and 3 wounds, doesn't get those advantages. And so the comparative advantage of a Demon Steed on an Exalted Hero or a little Chaos Sorcerer is excellent. So all of those things very, very useful for the Battle Standard Bearer, and you do need a Battle Standard Bearer, by the way, in Chaos. Your leadership is not absolutely brilliant, so it's not as though you will be able to get away, without having a BSB. Not that I think anyone really can in Fantasy. The next hero you've got is the Chaos Sorcerer, the level 1 or the level 2 Chaos Sorcerer. Now, you might want to have a level 1 wizard who carries a Dispel Magic Scroll, a so-called Scroll Caddy build. Now, the Dispel Magic Scroll is obviously one of the most selected magic items in the game because it stops a magic spell instantly, and that's obviously incredibly useful insurance policy to have up your sleeve. Personally, I quite like going in without any Dispel Magic Scroll, because I think that your army is threatening enough, and I think if you play well enough, your dice will be able to stop at least one of your opponent's most threatening spells, unless, of course, he double sixes it. At that point, the Dispel Scroll isn't really helping you anyway. If you need to stop 2, then, you might have got yourself into a more vulnerable position. Also, having like a level 1 Chaos Wizard with a Dispel Magic Scroll, that's quite a lot of points that you're paying a premium on your wizard for just to get a guy carrying a scroll. It's okay. I mean, in terms of if you want a level 1 wizard, probably Shadow's quite nice. He's got Melkoths, and that's a nice spell that you can usually always cast. Got a long range, cheap to cast. You might even be able to 1-dice it as well. That's probably the preference there, I think, for him. You might want to give him an Enchanted Shield, just to knock his armor save to 2+, and then stick him on the corner of a Chaos Warrior unit. He's probably not going to die. He might, but that's a lot of resources your opponent's going to have to put into killing a quite cheap model. So, you might want to have him, but at the same time, I think points are better spent elsewhere. Of course, you can have a Dispel Magic Scroll on your level 4 or on your Demon Prince, technically speaking, but you're going to want to pick certain other arcane first, I think, before you do them. Now, I'm actually just going to have a look at the magic items now, the Chaos Rewards and the magic items, because given that we're talking about characters, it makes sense to have a look at those. Now, you've got Chaos Mutations as well as magic items for Chaos. This is a legacy of way back where there used to be not only things like Chaos Gifts, but also Chaos Rewards and all manner of other things in previous editions. Now it's just a page of mutations and powers, a bit simplified, but nonetheless, there we are. So there are some good ones in here. I'll tell you what the good ones are. Demon Blade, not so good. Collar of Khorne, wouldn't bother with that. Unholy Strikes, rubbish. Flaming Breath, that's the first good one. 30 points for a 2d6 strength for breath weapon. The fact that it's 30 points is a bit of a pain because it means that you can't have it on a hero because you can only have up to 25 points of Chaos Mutations. But on a disc or something like that, on something with high mobility, having a breath weapon, really, really useful. Chaos Familiar, this is a really, really strong one. You'll see this a lot. First thing it does, channel on a 5 up rather than a 4 up. Oh yeah, that's really strong. On your opponent's magic phase as well as your own, you're going to get a lot more channel dice with that than you otherwise would do. And it gives you an extra spell, not an extra wizard level, but an extra spell. And if you're, shall we say, on a Lore of Magic where you really want to get one of the spells, like you're on Death and you want to get Purple Sun, or you're on Slaanesh and you want to get the Cacophonic Choir, having this is really useful because it is almost impossible to throw 5 dice and not be able to get a particular spell that you want. Not impossible, but it's very, very unlikely. Whereas with 4 dice, there is a significant minority chance that might. Scaled Skin next. That's really useful because it gives you another 5-up armor save that stacks with your Chaos Armor. Basically, this is your passport to getting a 1-up armor save for a guy on foot. And it's probably going to be someone in your army who's going to have that. Probably your Demon Prince. Allure of Slaanesh I don't rate. Neither Poisonous Slime, neither Ashidika. Burning Body, I think, has got a place. It gives you flaming attacks and 5-up ward against flame. Second bit's not what's important, it's the first bit. You might want to give this to like an Exalted Hero or a BSB who's got a high initiative score. Fly him into combat with a regenerating unit with your other stuff. He'll probably go quite high up the initiative chain or first, and if you can do 1 wound on your opposition, they're going to lose regen for the whole combat phase. So if you're fighting something like Trolls, something like Beasts of Nergal, someone who's using Troll Guts or something, Ogres, this is really useful. Obviously, he's only useful in combination, but remember, if they take a flaming wound, the regen's gone for the whole phase, and so that's why you want it on a model that's got high initiative, because then your other guys can, benefit from what he's done. Soul Feeder, I mentioned, regaining wounds on a 6, 10 points, absolute joke of a price tag, absolute steal. You want that. Third Eye of Tzeentch, yeah, look, if you're running Tzeentch with that ward save combination, 10 points for the Third Eye of Tzeentch. You've already gone that far. Why not do the rest? Nurgle's Rot, nice and fluffy and okay. And Hideous Visage, 5 points for causing fear. I think that's pretty decent, really. You cause fear, which is not great in 8th edition, but it's worth something, and you become immune to fear, just for 5 points. Kind of thing you probably want to have on like a level 1 wizard or something if he's going along with your Chaos Warriors who aren't otherwise immune. The Dread Artifacts of Chaos. These are the Chaos magic items. In 8th Ed, not very many race-specific magic items. Most of the magic items are, of course, back in the core rules as it was going back into 4th Ed. There are obviously some good magic items in there, but I won't bother going into those. You've got the Hellfire Sword. Flaming attacks, multiple wounds, D3, you explode, do more damage. I've never used it, I must admit. I think there's probably a place for it on a flying Chaos Lord. If you want to solo him in there and hope the Hellfire Sword blows people up and then causes other people to blow up and stuff, it could be fun. But I can think of some much stronger choices in the book than I think that is. Sword of Change, I wouldn't bother with. Filth Mace, I think if you're running Nergal, I think Filth Mace has probably got a role. That seems reasonably strong. Poisoned attacks, multiple wound, D3 after you've done 1 wound. Sounds quite strong. Helm of Many Eyes gives you always strikes first. Now, remember that in 8th edition, if you've got equal to or higher initiative than your opponent, always strikes first means rerolls to hit, which is the mainstay, obviously, of elves. Helm of Many Eyes is going to allow your Chaos Champion to benefit from that. So that's why it's a nice magic item. Makes him stupid, though, which might be a problem. But, a nice enough magic item. Not top tier, but, definitely nice enough. Skull of Catum, another nice magic item. You roll 6 channeling dice instead of 1. If you roll 1s, they get deducted from your leadership, and you die if you get to leadership 0, which is quite funny. But realistically, if this is on a level 1 wizard or something, you've got leadership 8, so it's going to take a long time to be killed. You can only use those Skullocatum channeling on your phase, though, not your opponent's. It's alright, but it's an arcane item, and there's some other excellent Chaos familiars. Chalice of Chaos, I think that's quite nice. It's a fluffy item. You roll on the table if you take it. It gives you some not particularly great stuff, but it can turn you into a Chaos Spawn or a Demon Prince, which is nice. I think in a fun game, I would put that on like a level 1 wizard. I think that's probably about its use, and sometimes it might be fantastic, but it's certainly not a competitive item. Pendant of Tanesh I don't rate. Blasted Standard reduces the strength of missile attacks coming into a unit for Tzeentch only. I think this might work if you've got a big unit of something very Tzeentchy that you really want to protect, which might mean, for example, a unit of Tzeentch Chosen. Then I might consider the Blasted Standard, but I probably wouldn't pick any of the choices that would benefit from Standard. So for that reason, I probably wouldn't. But awesome Tzeentch warriors. It might not be the worst. Banner of Rage, you don't lose Frenzy. I think that could be useful, but quite frankly, if you play well, I don't think your Juggernauts or your Khorne warriors should ever be losing their Frenzy, because they shouldn't really be losing combats. If you are losing a combat, it's probably because you've been flanked or because you've bitten off more than you can chew. And in that case, you're probably going to be running anyway, and not going to have a chance to regain your Frenzy. So I just think that the number of occasions where that would be very useful in is just quite minor. And to be honest, I would say give them a different magic banner and just don't get them into a situation where they're going to be losing combat, because they really shouldn't be. Next, let's have a look at the special characters now, your other options for Lords and Heroes. Now, special characters are not everyone's cup of tea. They were very controversial in 4th edition and 5th edition, where they first appeared. Generally, people didn't use them. In 6th ed, there were very few of them, just a couple per army, and they became sort of more acceptable then because they were more balanced. And then, back into 8th ed, they kind of, a lot more of them, and they became more acceptable again, it seems. So, unless you've agreed not to use special characters with your opponent, I think the assumption is you can use special characters. But, that's just my view on that score. Other people really have it in for special characters. Sometimes they don't like them aesthetically as well, especially when you've got the idea of, there's just this little skirmish here on the Border Princes, and, look, there are 2 legendary, Warhammer characters that you've got, I don't know, you've got Kurt Helborg and Sigbol the Magnificent or something, who might not actually have even lived at the same time in Warhammer history. Anyway, let's not go into that. So who are your Lord choices? First of all, you've got Archaon, Lord of the End Times, the teenage boy's spiky Chaos Lord with more spikes who takes over the world, and in Age of Sigmar, his horsey thing has become, a plus drinker, a blabber monster, 2-headed evil monster of chaos, doom-monger, etc., TM, or whatever it is, whatever it might be called in Age of Sigmar. Anyway, so, Archaon, I hate him because he's got stupid lore, and he's as cheesy as hell. But as a gaming piece, he's okay. He's very expensive. He's 580 points. That's before you include Durgar. Took some up to 650 with him. So therefore, even undorgard, Archaon is not going to be seen in any game of less than 2,400 points. And he's going to take up all your Lord's allowance. He's got a Mega Magic Sword. He's really hard to kill. He's a level 2 wizard. He can buy a buff for his unit. He does loads of different things. He's best off, quite frankly, if you want to run a Death Star. You want to run loads of Chaos Warriors, you make them the Swords of Chaos, you put Archaon in it, you put all your other characters in it, your BSB, your Wizard, and that's going to be your army. Now, I don't like playing like that. I think it's the most boring way of playing, but that unit is going to be pretty much unkillable, and you're really going to struggle to use it. You're also going to struggle to kill your opponent, because your opponent probably isn't going to fight Archaon in a massive unit of 40 Chaos Warriors or whatever he's in then. But that's Archaon's role, I think. You could put him on Dorgar with some Skull Crushers or something. Obviously, that's going to give you an absolutely terrifying unit. But, you know, a unit of Skull Crushers is already going to be good enough to defeat 95% of things that you're going to be finding, maybe 99%. So putting Archaon, Lord of the End Times, in there as well. Do you really need 9 warheads in your nuclear missile? I think your enemy is going to be dead if you've got 1. Gorarch next up in the pecking order. Oh yeah, baby, this is really where we're getting spicy. Gorage is the 2-headed Chaos Dragon who was a dragon, who ate a Lord of Change and then went mad and then starts arguing with himself as the kind of dragon bit gains sort of ascendancy over the Chaos bit. I really like Gorage. I think he's a really, really cool idea for a character. I think he's very chaotic, and I think a lot of other things in this book are not very chaotic and are actually just kind of good and a bit predictable. But Gorage is a proper chaos piece. So he's a dragon. It's got 6 in every stat, which is pretty cool, apart from leadership, which is 9. You know, obviously he's a monster, he's good, he's got Thunder Stomp. Yeah, that's really good. But, he's got 2 breath weapons. One of them is, you know, the Dark Fire of Chaos. The other is called the Breath of Cheese. And I know it's supposed to be called Breath of Change, but it might as well be called Breath of Cheese. When Gorach opens his mouth and the odours of kind of, you know, Camembert and Gouda and all the rest of it come out of it, which is the Breath of Cheese, anything that fails a toughness test, and it can be done in combat as well, remember, so 2d6 there, 1 failed toughness test, and you are dead! With no armor save, no ward save, no regen save, no nothing. You are removed from the table, and that is the end of you. This alone makes Gorach worth having, because it means he will terrify the opponent. Any piece in the whole of Warhammer Fantasy, you know, whoever it is going to be afraid of Gorach. Even if you're playing in like some silly game and you've got that, you know, the, I don't know, the Glockkin or something like that, or you've got the Phoenix King of whatever it is, you know, all of them are going to be afraid of this, because it's just going to mean they're dead if they fail a single toughness test against Gorach's Breath of Change. So they're never going to want to fight him. The only way of beating Gorach in combat is to go in there, strike before Gorach, and he's got initiative 6, which is pretty quick for a big monster, and they're going to have to just kill him, and they're going to have to get through 6 wounds, 3 up armor save, 6 up ward save, or they're probably going to be dead to the Breath of Change. He's also a level 4 wizard as well. He's got the Mark of Tzeentch. It's not ideal, admittedly, the Mark of Tzeentch. He would be better if he had another kind of Tzeentch, or if he could pick metal, like a Demon Prince on Tzeentch. But, you know, it's workable. You can live with Tzeentch. I find Gorach is very similar to a Demon Prince in the way that he operates. He's probably slightly more vulnerable to cannonballs, because he's not got a charmed shield. That's probably the only real problem with it. But there's a way you can protect Demon Princes on Gorach against cannonballs, which I'll come on to later when I talk about Chaos Trolls, which is going to nerf most of the danger. Next in line, we've got Kolek Sunnita. Ooh, this guy is a mammoth of a beastie. He's got strength 8, 8 wounds and 7 attacks, and a massive hammer that does D3 wounds. Obviously, you know, if you get pretty much Kolek into combo with anything, you're going to be dead. It's really as simple as that. But he's got initiative 1. This means that Kolek is going to be going down the Pit of Shades. He's going to be disappearing into the purple sun. All of those sorts of spells are going to be cast on Kolek, and that a lot of the time is going to be what kills him. For that reason, while he's really, really strong, he's basically a bit of a turkey dinner here. You know, 1 adverse dice, and that's the end of him. Maybe he's got a role, but I think he's primarily a fluff character. Sigbol the Magnificent. You know, he's basically an infantry lord. He walks along, he's got good armor save, regen, he's got a lot of attacks. But the main thing he does is he makes the block of infantries with stubborn. So you're going to see Sigvald in a big infantry block, big Chaos Warrior block, or a big Marauder block. And that unit is going to pin the centre, and That's really going to be a lot of where the game is decided. Obviously, if you've got Sigvald, it really helps if you've got some other things that you can charge into your opponent when he gets bogged down fighting Sigvald's unit. If you've not got much else apart from Sigvald's unit, then the stubborn stuff doesn't really matter so much. I think he's very solid. He's not as expensive as some of the others. He's only 375 points. I think he's got a role, but at the same time, I still don't think he's certainly not high tier. But I don't think he's necessarily poor. Valkyria the Bloody, unfortunately, is not very usable. She doesn't have a good enough armor save protection. She's very overcosted for what she does. Why would you have her when you just have a Demon Prince, quite frankly? Also, all she is infantry, stomp or anything. So, that means she can be stomped too. She's going to struggle to go into challenges against stuff that's got Thunder Stomp. I really wouldn't at all. Lords, continued Vlich the Curseling. Absolute rubbish. He's probably the single worst thing in the army book. I can't think of any reason why you'd use him. He's got the worst magic deck. His Vessel of Chaos thing is not very useful either. He's garbage. And yeah, that's all the Lords. Then the heroes. Now the heroes, all of them are quite strong, really. One of them is outright fantastic in the same way as Gorach is fantastic. The others are all solid. The first solid one is Wolfrick the Wanderer. Now, he is basically just a chaos hero. He's a barbarian dude with a flying ship. He basically beats up people in challenges. He auto makes people accept challenges and rerolls hit and wound in those challenges. And he's got okay stats, and so he's usually going to beat most things in challenges. He can also ambush and bring a unit of Marauders with him to ambush. Now, while Marauders are pretty rubbish, this is one of the only instances where you're probably going to want to have some Marauders with Wolfrick. You're probably going to have Khorne. He's not got a Mark of Chaos, Wolfrick. He's a Chaos Undivided character who can go with anyone. You're probably going to want Khorne on the Marauders. You're going to want Flails. And you're going to want about 40 of them because Marauders die like flies. And hopefully, on come turn 2, Wolfrick and 40 Marauders are going to turn up behind your opponent, and that's going to give him, obviously, no end of trouble. The problem is, you've got to pose as a significant threat from the front as well for him to be scared. Otherwise, he'll just move his unit forwards into the middle of the table, and when Wolfrick does turn up, he's not really going to have anything to fight. There's also a danger that Wolfrick might just, be having a picnic or something. And so your opponent will march forward and beat up your 1,800 or 1,700 points that's left on the table with all of his 2,500, and then Wolfrick will appear in about turn 3, and maybe there's like a light cavalry unit waiting for him to stand in front of him and do anything. That's the problem with Wolfrick, which is why he's challenging. But the surprise factor is powerful. Next one, Throgg, the King of the Trolls. Oh yeah, excellent. Maybe even better than Gorage. Throgg is one of the strongest characters in the whole of the game. In fact, I might argue he is the very strongest character in the whole of the game. So he's basically the King of the Trolls. He's got Strength 8, he's got 4 wounds, he's got 5 attacks, he's got a 4-up regen. He's got a Breath Weapon that does 2d6 Strength 5, Ignore, Armor, Vomit. You can do that in a challenge. Most things are going to go down to the Vomit attack on its own, notwithstanding Throgg's other very good attacks too. So he's a really, really strong fighter. He can beat up 500-point combat lords a lot of the time. So, he's going to beat up most things that there are. Now, there are some characters in the game that will beat your characters, like a tooled-up vampire lord with, all of his extra attacks and Red Fury and all the rest of it. But there's not a lot. Throgg can beat almost everything. And the other thing about Throgg, if all this wasn't enough, the fact that he's only 195 points wasn't enough, he makes Trolls Core. This means that you can have Trolls out of your special choice, and Trolls are probably better than Chaos Warriors. They're better value for points. They're much harder to kill. You can have an army of Trolls, and that's an absolute nightmare for your opponent. Throgg can go in a unit of Trolls, of course. Him with 8 Trolls with him. Absolute nightmare. Or you could have a Troll Horde. Really, really so strong. Completely alters what the whole army is just this special character, because you can have Trolls of Chaos and not Warriors of Chaos with him. And if all of this was not enough, ladies and gentlemen, he also has an item called the Wintertooth Crown, which gives him an 18-inch leadership bubble for monsters, monstrous beasts, and war beasts, which is a kind of a nice source of emergency leadership for like your Chaos Hounds or something if your general isn't near. Fantastic character is Throg. Again, you know, don't expect to make too many friends if you use them all the time. Festus. Another very creditable character from the Hero's Choice. Again, like Wolfrick, quite context specific. He's a level 2 Nergal wizard. That's not ideal, of course. And he has buffs that he gives to the unit. He makes the unit poisoned attacks, and he gives them a 5-up regen. Both are really good. He's going to be in a Chaos Warrior unit more often than not. So you're going to have poison attacks on your warriors and a 5-up regen in addition to your armor save. It's going to make your warriors a lot more survivable. Plus, if you get some characters and put it with the unit, like a BSB, this is one of the instances where I definitely would recommend putting a BSB in your unit, he's going to also benefit from Festus's 5-up regen. Now, Festus, the problem with him is that his buffs are the main thing. The Nergal magic on level 2 is not great. If you get Curse the Leper on him, lucky you, because that's the spell that you want, but you're going to have to roll it up on a level 2 wizard. You're probably not going to get it. Festus also has a thing where he can do a strength test, and you can do a strength test, and if your opponent fails, they take D3 wounds. That's quite nice, actually, if they try and challenge Festus, which they will. Because occasionally, you know, they'll get egg on their face from doing it, but most of the time not. They'll kill Festus. Festus, again, like the vanilla Chaos Sorcerer, really is harmed by the obligation of Chaos Warriors to challenge. Festus does not want to be challenging anybody, because if he dies, your unit buffs are lost. So, you know, you should have a champion in the unit with Festus. A BSB in the unit of Festus is nice because it means that the BSB can hopefully take some of the challenges, buying Festus time to not die. Also, if you want to be really cheesy, well, you could put a command group in the unit, a BSB, perhaps on a palanquin of Nergal to take up more space, and then Festus can be put in the second rank, which means that he cannot be attacked. But this is all micromanaged. And to be honest, I would probably just run the Nergal warrior block, which is what this is going to be, maybe 7 wide, and put Festus on the edge. And, you know, if your opponent manages to kill him, good luck to him and to hell with it. Hopefully your unit's going to smash him to smithereens first. Right. Next one is Skylar. The last of our hero choices here from the special character hero range, and a very decent one. Skylar used to be a champion, got turned into a Chaos Spawn. He's got leadership 10, and that means he's the only character in this whole book, apart from Archaon himself, who has got leadership 10. So if you pick him, unless you pick Archaon as well, Skylar's going to be your general, and that means you've got leadership 10, which is really nice. Apart from that, you know, he's a Chaos Spawn, he's unbreakable, which is nice, but at the same time, you know, he's only got toughness 5, 4 wounds, 5 off armor, 6 up ward, so a lot of your opponent's better units are probably just going to kill Skylar in one turn, and then they'll get to turn round as well, which is a problem. So, you know, he's not that great at holding things up, which is what Chaos Spawn sort of historically used to do in previous editions, because the second rank can fight because they've got no armor save, they don't really last even one combat round, which is why they're not great. He's got Hatred, he's got Swift Stride, so he can jump out of a unit with his movement of 6. Random attacks D6 plus 2 plus khorne for Frenzy. You know, so he does hit fairly hard, to be fair. And the best thing about Skylar is he's only 105 points. Oh yeah, and he gives Magic Res 3 to a unit as well. You could stick him in a unit of Khorne Warriors. He won't be unbreakable that way, but you could charge him out, etc. You know, useful. For 105 points, I think in a small game, Skylar would be one of my first picks. In the 1,000-point battle, he's excellent. 1,500, excellent. 2,500, not really sure he has so much of a place. So those are your characters. I haven't said very much about the mounts, the demonic mounts for, you know, some of the things you can get. Disc's good. Demonic Steed is good. Juggernaut, not as good as a demonic Steed. Steed of Slaanesh has definitely got a place. Vanguard, movement 10, nice and like a Slaanesh wizard. That's definitely quite impressive, and so is the normal Chaos Steed as well. But apart from those three, the Demon Steed, the Disc, and the normal Chaos Steed, those are the three the most as your mounts. Next, the actual troop types now. Well, there are, of course, the obligation in 8th edition to have 25% core choices, and for some armies that can be a bit of a pain because it means that you have to have sort of some rubbish, a so-called core tax, as some people call it. Now, your core units are quite strong because you're blessed with one very strong one, which is the humble Chaos Warrior. Chaos Warriors are one of the best core units in the game, I think. They are very, very solid indeed, and you have a myriad of different ways of running them. You can run them with all their marks of chaos, and you can give them additional hand weapons, halberds, or great weapons. Now, one thing I should say about Chaos Warriors is while they are a very solid core choice, and you're going to see them a lot of the time, and they're going to do a good job for you most of the time, at the very highest levels of cheesiness, I don't think Warriors really cut it. I think Trolls are better. Elven elites like Phoenix Guard and Witch Elves usually beat Chaos Warriors a lot of the time, and so for that reason, and as I say, I prefer Trolls if I'm going into heavy games. But for all other games that are not of that heaviest nature, Chaos Warriors, I think, are a very solid pick. I have things like Festus with them, and things are quite nice. Now, in terms of the builds for Chaos Warriors, there are a lot of different things. First thing I'd say, take full command on Chaos Warriors. And there's no downside to that, I don't think. You are going to want to have a champion in your unit, so you can roll on Eye of the Gods for him. And he can beat up other unit champions usually as well. You might get a Demon Prince. And so he can accept challenges so that, if you're in a combat with your other mega killy thing, then your champion can go in there and accept the challenge from your opponent's unit champion, allowing your Chaos Lord, your Demon Prince or whatever, to get on smashing skulls, which is what he wants to be there to do. As for the builds, well, you could have Mark of Khorne. That's 3 attacks per model. Mark of Khorne with halberds. 3 strength 5 attacks per Chaos Warrior, plus 1 support as well. That's nice. But, is it really transforming the unit that much to put like another 5 or 6 strength 5 attacks there with all the disadvantages of Frenzy? I'm not sure that it is. Tzeentch, that's solid. The way of running Tzeentch really is to leave them with hand weapon and shield, which means they're a bit cheaper because they don't have to buy any more equipment, and benefit from the stacking of the Tzeentch ward save. In combat, you are going to be 3 up armor on the Chaos Warrior from Chaos Armor and Shield, and 5 up ward save. That's going to be a stubborn little unit you've got there. Maybe run them 5x4 just as a block. Cheap and nice, and still with decent defense as well. Slaanesh I wouldn't bother with Chaos Warriors unless you are running a small unit that you need to have like a banner in. Maybe you're playing in a campaign where you need to have standards to capture objectives and things, and Chaos Warriors aren't very good at that because they've got more expensive units. Then 10 with Slaanesh so they don't panic. For a unit you're not really going to do much fighting with is probably about what you want really. And then you've got Nergal. Oh yeah. Nergal's the strong one, I think, here. -1 to hit. I explained about why that's really good earlier. Probably want Nergal warriors with halberds, so you're dishing out strength 5 hits and you're still -1 to hit. It's a nice combination of attack and defense. Really, really strong indeed. And the most common builds you'll probably see there will be 6x3, or you might want a larger unit. If you're going to have something like Festus with it. If you've got Festus and Nurgle Warriors, you might want to get up to 25 Chaos Warriors. Otherwise, I don't think there's a lot of point having more than 20, unless you want to really play Death Stars. And I don't like Chaos Warrior Death Stars, and don't like them when they have to be boards with a really wide frontage. With 25mm bases, the Horde is so unmaneuverable. It's going to get you into more trouble than it's worth. It's very easy for your opponent to chaff. It's very easy opponent void. So next core choices, you've got the Chaos Marauder. Now the Chaos Marauder is the great tragedy of this army, I'm afraid. Chaos Marauders are absolutely awful. Unfortunately, they are so overcosted for what they do. They are basically just humans on big bases. with no armor. They die so easily. Their marks are as expensive as Chaos Warriors. Their equipment is as expensive as Warriors. They just really are not worth it, I'm afraid. There are a couple of instances where they've got some marginal use. One of them is Khorne Warriors with flails to go with Wolfrick, if you're going to use him. And the other is maybe you want to just have a unit of Slaanesh dudes with a standard, for the same reason as I mentioned a small Chaos Warrior unit with a standard to save some points. Purely to put some more bodies on the field so that you can get another bit of fortitude. Maybe you're playing the Blood and Glory scenario, maybe you're playing in a campaign where you have more banners. Apart from that, the Marauders are absolutely and completely useless and I see no use for them whatsoever, unfortunately. Just too bad. Forsaken are also absolute garbage. They're basically as garbage as the Marauders. If you're going to have them, Forsaken of Slaanesh is the best, giving them movement 6 and swift stride. Again, really a fluffy unit more than anything else, just like the Marauders. And I should say, there's nothing wrong with fluffy units whatsoever. As I'm looking at this from the meta of, trying to win games. Who said that that's the way you want to be playing Warhammer Fantasy? Absolutely. If that's your thing, absolutely go for it. If you're like me and you like competitive gaming, but you also like fluff gaming, then fair enough. But at least by knowing the things that are competitive, that helps you know the things that are not competitive. And so if you're an experienced player and you're playing a new player, then maybe that's where you want to bring out your Marauders and your Slaughter Brute and your Forsaken and all that. And to give yourself a different kind of challenge, but also not to just smash their face on the floor the first time they play, which is a horrible thing to do. Although it is somewhat in the spirit, I think, of Chaos, sort of to do that. Going way back into the old days where your army was better than everyone else's. So yeah. Anyway, next on the core units, Chaos Warhounds. Really useful units. 6 points per model. Units of 5, 30 points for a fast piece of chaff. Park them in front of your opponents. Run them in front of cannons. Run them in front of steam tanks. Put them in front of your best units. Put them anywhere where your opponent is going to want to go, basically. They are very useful indeed. You can also give them Vanguard. That's really nice. Gives them an extra bit of speed. They make a Vanguard move and then they can march 14 inches. You'll have them right under your opponent's nose in turn 1 if you get the first turn. They are also just about good enough, combat-wise, to beat War Machine crews. That's all, but they can do that. I would have 3 units of dogs in a 2,500 point army, maybe 2 of them with Vanguard, 1 of them without Vanguard. The one without Vanguard is there to just hang back a bit, to give you another unit of chaff that you might need later in the game. But all really useful. Don't bother with Scaly Skin or mutant poisons. I can't see any use for that. Unless you want to run literally an army of them. Hilarious. Chaos Chariot now. This is a very strong pick. It's a core chariot. It's got toughness 5, 4 wounds and a 3-up armor save, and the Chaos Warriors in it are, pretty good themselves. 2 Chaos Warriors with halberds. Chaos Steeds, they've got strength 4, impact hits, d6+1. It hits hard for a chariot, and it's quite tanky as well. You can give it a mark. I think Khorne's probably the best. 2 more attacks on your crew, and also your chariot doesn't panic. That's quite nice, I think. Tzeentch wouldn't bother. Nergal, on the chariot, it just seems to be overcosted. It's 15 points. I don't know why, which is more than it is on the Gorbace Chariot. It seems to be a misprint. Slaanesh at 5 points. Not bad. Not bad. If you don't want a chariot to panic. And yeah, I think the Chaos Chariot's very useful. You could, given it's a core choice, you could spam them. If you really wanted to play competitively, you could have 5 Khorne chariots all running together. They're going to hit like a ton of bricks and is not going to be that expensive and comes out core choice. But generally speaking, you'll see 1 or 2 chariots in a supporting capacity. They're fast as well, movement 8, swift stride. You can't go wrong with a Chaos Chariot. They really are very, very cheap and good. Finally, with core, we have another good unit, the Marauder Horseman. Now, the Marauder Horseman, unlike the unmounted Marauders, who are not very good at all, are really rather impressive. They are just very, very cheap for what they do. They're fast cavalry, so they vanguard, they can do feigned flight, and of course you can give them the mark of Slaanesh, which, as I explained at the beginning of this video, means they're immune to fear, terror, and panic, and still flee. So they get the best of all worlds. In terms of how you equip them, I would say you probably could give them throwing weapons or javelins if you've got some spare points, you fancy a bit of shooting, although don't expect much from that. And you probably want to give them flails because, you know, the Marauders with their weapon skill of 4 and the fact that they've got a horse, with a flail as well, you know, you've got 5 of them. If that charges, that's a not completely insignificant flanking unit. You know, it's probably worth the points. But Marauder Horsemen are more of a premium unit of chaff. They're better than Chaos Hounds because they're fast cavalry, they're a bit quicker, and they've got a bit more combat potential as well, and they're not going to run away in the same way. Hellstriders now, which come out of Special. Now, I know these don't have a great reputation, but I think they're really rather good. These are basically Marauders who are riding Steeds of Slaanesh. So they've got movement 10 and a Vanguard. So they are even faster than normal Marauders. In terms of how they hit, it's about the same as a Marauder Horseman, really. There's not a lot of difference. They have a fluffy thing where if they kill units, they get some buffs, but I don't think you find that being relevant. They also cause fear, which is nice. Yeah, they are, you know, really quite nice. I think that they are as powerful as, or probably as useful as Marauder Horseman. I probably would use Marauder Horseman first because they're a bit cheaper and they don't come out of Special. But, you know, Hellstriders, perfectly respectable choice as a premium piece of chaff. Chosen next. These are like beefy Chaos Warriors who get to roll on the Eye of the Gods table themselves. You War Shrine to try and get an advantage. Now you then apply that effect to the unit. Of course, if you get something like +1 toughness, you've suddenly got a toughness 5 unit that's also got +1 weapon skill over normal Chaos Warriors. Obviously, that's very, very strong. But at the same time, you might not get something that's that great. You might get a Demon Prince, possibly. And I just don't think Chosen are really worth the points compared to other Chaos Warriors. And of course, they come out of Special. If they were core, I think that would be different. But really, all of the same comments on Chaos Warriors apply. They are very, very similar, just a bit more expensive. Chaos Knights, you know, obviously these were powerful going back in the past, but at 40 points per model, I think they're overcosted. If you're going to run them, I think I'd run them as khorne, because with heavy cavalry, it's all about the charge. Probably with ensorcelled weapons, giving them +1 strength in all combat rounds, rather than the lance giving them +2 only on the first round. They've got a 1-up armor save, but, you know, there are loads of things that ignore armor in 8th edition. Lots of high strength things. Believe me, when Chaos Knights had 1-up armor save in 4th ed, and in those days 1-up meant 1-up. It meant that if you rolled a 1, they passed, which meant that you had to be strength 4 in order to even be able to kill the Chaos Knight, and a lot of things weren't strength 4 then. So 1-up save, not what it used to be, but still powerful enough. But Chaos Knights, I think, a bit overcosted compared to Juggernauts, which we'll talk about in just a minute. Chaos Ogres, another seldom used troop choice. They've got the Ogre special rules, they've got the Ogre charge, they've got fear, you can give them marks. You're going to have Ogres. Mark of Nergal, I guess, is quite nice. You know, you've got -1 to hit against the model that's got 3 wounds. You know, that's quite a lot of protection you're getting there for 4 points. Mark of Slaanesh is quite nice if you're going to go and say run them on a flank with 2 weapons. Mark of Slaanesh, that's going to be a quite effective little flanking unit that's not going to run away that often, only for about 100 points. It's also a nice way of getting a bit more fortitude in your army if you need that for Blood and Glory, because the Ogres can have a standard bearer. I think they're okay, but, you know, the problem is with them is that they die quite easily. They've got toughness 4, they've only got heavy. But, you know, they're not that expensive. They're okay. Dragon Ogres next. I'm very sorry about this. They are awful. I really like Dragon Ogres, but unfortunately, normal Dragon Ogres are rubbish. The Dragon Ogre Shaguth is rubbish, and Codex Sunnita is also a bit rubbish. Dragon Ogres got royally shafted. The person who wrote this book really had it in for Dragon Ogres, unfortunately, of all kinds. The reason they're rubbish is because they're double the points of Ogres. They have 1 more point of movement, 1 more point of weapon skill, and 1 more point of strength and 1 wound and another leadership. That is not worth double the points of Ogres. What they're crying out for is toughness 5. They really are. If they had that, then they would still probably be overpriced, but they might be a little bit more viable. There are no instances of where I could see Dragon Ogres being of any use to anyone, I'm afraid. I really find them to be quite appalling, sadly, for their points. Moving on to special unit here, another of our sort of kind of monstrous infantry kind of dudes, Chaos Trolls. Oh yes, yes. You would have thought this army is called Warriors of Chaos, but not really. If you want to play super competitively, it's Trolls of Chaos with Throg. Yeah, so the Chaos Troll is so strong. I don't know why, but I haven't found that a lot of people, when I talk to about this Chaos book, they don't necessarily bang on much about Trolls. Nowhere near, in my opinion, as they should be. I think the Trolls are probably the best thing in the whole book. So they're 35 points each, the same as an Ogre. They've got 3 wounds, toughness 4, a 4-up regen, so they're basically double the damage resilience of an Ogre, virtually. They've got strength 5, also more than an Ogre, and they've got a breath weapon, or a strength 5 vomit weapon which ignores armor, which is auto hit, which is perfect against things like other juggernauts, demigryph knights, anything with a 1-up armor save. Fighting a Frostheart Phoenix, something that knocks your strength down generically, doesn't knock the strength down of your breath weapon, because that's like, you know, coming out of the weapon effectively. They are stupid, of course, that's the problem, but even that has a silver lining, which is that it makes them immune to psychology. So your trolls aren't going to panic, which also is a real advantage. Of course, you've got to lead them properly, and they can go stupid, and that's the obvious thing. But leadership 9 with a reroll, you're not going to go that far wrong. If you've got Throg in the army as well, you can use his emergency leadership. You've also got the option to give your unit additional hand weapons, the 4 attacks each. I wouldn't really bother, to be honest. I think you've already got the killing power. Unless you run like a 3 unit of trolls, then I would put the additional hand weapons on them for 12 strength 5 attacks, 9 wounds with toughness 4 and a 4-up regeneration save, all for the princely sum of just over 100 points. That is absolutely... So yeah, trolls, and I would probably use them, quite frankly, even if they're out of a special choice and you've not got Throg, otherwise they're core. There's another thing too. You can use them to keep your characters from being shot by cannonballs. Now you can use other things to do this, but the trolls are the best. And the reason is this. So what happens is, you run your trolls up, you put your characters, your Demon Prince, Gorach, Chaos Lord and the Dragon maybe, whatever, behind them. In order to shoot them, enemy cannons have to be able to see the bit of ground that they're targeting. So if you arrange it properly, there's a good chance that that cannonball is going to have to go through the trolls first. If you say you've got your guy like just 1 inch from the back of the last troll base. So it's going to be quite hard for the cannon, unless it's really lucky, to shoot in such a way that it goes right in front of your guy and then hits him. It's probably going to hit the trolls first. And if it does that, it's going to need to kill them. Got a wound, then they've got to fail a 4-up regen, and then the opponent's got to roll a 3-up to even kill them, given their wound. You might have 2 ranks of them. If they don't kill one, that's the cannonball stop dead. So yeah, they are a really good way of making it so that your opponent probably not going to be able to cannon those guys off. And the best bit of it is that your dragon or your demon prince can see over the trolls, and so they can charge out with their fly rule. Just walk them up behind the trolls. That's my advice, and your opponent is really going to struggle to cannon those off unless they're very lucky. So that's another reason why trolls are just strategically so useful. Chimera next. Yeah, this is edition 1 from the Chaos Video Nasty Shelf. The Chimera is a real bastard. It's a horrible thing. It's a really nasty monster. It's got strength 6. It's got between 7 and 9 attacks. It's got a breath weapon that you can buy. And it's got regen. It's horrible. It really kills things amazingly effectively. Basically, and it can fly. Just run it into things and let it kill things. That would be my advice. It can get cannoned off, but, you know, it has got regen, and so every turn that cannon's firing at your Chimera, it's not firing at something else. It's also not necessarily that expensive either, and it causes terror. Now, it does have leadership 5, and if something happens that it doesn't like, if it gets upset by something, it'll have a massive hissy fit and bugger off, and you'll never see it again. Which is why you should not put it next to things like Chaos Hounds, because it's going to panic and then it's going to disappear. Run it on its own without anything that might trigger a panic test around it. Then, because it's immune to fear and terror, because it causes them, you shouldn't have too many problems with psychology. But it can still panic, so be careful with it. Other than that, get it into combat and let it stamp all over your opponents for the glory of chaos. You've got a Demon Prince and a Chimera. Those two guys going in there alone with their Thunderstomp is going to be enough to splat most of the rest of what your opponent has got. I told you, friends playing this. Next, Gorbace Chariot. Well, you know, this is like for people who want an even tougher chariot. It's slow, but it's very tough. It's got 5 wounds, it's got toughness 6, both +1 on a normal chariot. It's got 3 up armor save. You can give it a mark of Nergal to ruin your opponent's day and mean they're -1 to hit against it as well. It's so hard to kill, it really is. Oh dear. Now it is slow, but it does have swift stride and movement 6, so it can do some longer bomb charges. Also, sometimes if it does solos a charge on its own, you know, it's sometimes going to win combat or only lose combat by a couple, and if you can hold it, then your opponent can't charge, and maybe your Chaos Warriors who are coming up along with it can get into the fight and not be charged themselves. So, yeah, it's really, really strong, the Gorbace Chariot. It does more damage than a normal Chaos Chariot because the Gorbeast is that much better and it's more survivable. I like it less than the normal Chaos Chariot because it doesn't come out of core, and I also like the additional speed of a chariot that you can have for a flanker. But if you want to run an infantry-centric list, then, you know, having some Gorbace Chariots chuntering along with their movement 6 like a pair of tanks with your Chaos Warriors, not a bad idea. Another slow piece to which this could be said as well is the War Shrine. The War Shrine is a nice little piece, I think. It's not great in combat, does some little attacks, but it's super tough. Toughness 5, 5 wounds, 4 up armor, 4 up ward, and you can give it 3 up ward if it gets the marker Tzeentch. With the Tzeentch ward, it's borderline unkillable unless it gets broken in combat and destroyed. It's really cheap as well. The other thing it does is it does a little spell called the Giver of Glory, which you could 1 dice, and D3 champions within 12 inches get to roll on the Eye of the Gods table, which is really nice. You know, you might get a Demon Prince out of that. But I think, moreover, your opponent, they might not necessarily know what the Eye of the Gods does in all its detail, and they may just stop it, waste their Dispel dice. If you're playing Chaos, I would always let Eye of the Gods go, even if you 1 dices it. Because a lot of the time, it doesn't really do that much. Or it simply makes Archaon get another attack or something like that. And so, damn what? I'm not going to fight Archaon anyway. So, it doesn't matter whether he gets some extra buffs. Right. Moving on now to your rare choices. The first of these is the Hell Cannon. This, along with the Chimera, is the other monster that you'll see a lot in Chaos armies. The Hell Cannon does a lot of good things. First of all, it's a war machine. It's a stone thrower. It fires a strength 10 template with 5 on the outer edges. This can really flatten units. And of course, it just gives you something you don't otherwise ordinarily have, which is shooting, which is really nice. Also, there's a panic test if something takes at least 1 damage from a Hell Cannon at -1. So, ooh, this is a scary one. If your opponent's got something that's not immune to psychology on a flank, fire a Hell Cannon into it. You know, a test at -1, there's a good chance they might fail that. And also, what it does is it's really good in combat as well. It's got toughness 6, 5 wounds, and 5 attacks, and some extra attacks from the Chaos Dwarf crew as well. It's got a Thunderstomp. So, you know, it's going to often be there with its movement of 3 behind you. Opponent's going to try and flank you. It's going to come and charge them, and they're going to find that the Hell Cannon also hits like a ton of bricks as well. It can really just fight if it wants to. It's good enough to do that. Some other things about it. It's so hard to kill. It's unbreakable, for one thing. That's another reason why it's great in combat. And also, it's tough to cannon off as well, because First of all, it's got 5 wounds. Secondly, it's got a 5-up ward save. And thirdly, it's got monsters and handlers, which is, you know, if you read the rules for it, it's really a bit cheesy. You do the wound, go through all the saves, and then you roll a dice. And roll of 1 to 4, it goes onto the cannon. On a roll of 5 to 6, it kills a Chaos Dwarf. So this gives it like another effective ward save against, you know, being killed, being shot. Now, it does have to take a leadership test at the beginning of every turn. If it fails it, it goes berserk and gets angry and can blow up your demon prince, or generally do rather nasty things to you as well if it's really having a bad day. I really like the Hell Cannon. I like things that sometimes kill you as well. That's why I'm kind of always a bit of an 8th ed player at heart. I quite like these things. It's really, really strong, essentially. You can't go too far wrong with it. Just make sure that you have a sensible place to put it. Probably on one side, on one flank, I think is quite nice, where it can, you know, see everything it needs to see. And if your opponent tries to run something alongside you, then you might want to use the Hell Cannon to become a flank policeman as well. Causes terror as well, by the way. That's also quite useful. If your opponent is minded to put some light unit around the side. Right, other rare units, you've got the Dragon Ogre Shaggoth. He's not very good, I'm afraid. It's a very standard, boring monster. It's got only toughness 5 and 6 wounds. It's got a 4-up save. I mean, it's all right. It's not great. You could give it a double-handed weapon or something. You know, it's got strength 8, which is okay. But really, for the points, it's not very strong. Monsters are not generally that great in Warhammer Fantasy 8th edition, and I don't think the Shaggoth really is more than a fluff choice. The Chaos Giant is also bad, unfortunately. I'm a real fan of giants. I love the models, especially the old Marauder Giant model, but in 8th ed, he's really not very good. He's got almost the same rules in 8th edition that he had going way back to 4th edition. But in 4th edition, he was a lot better for a couple of reasons. He had more toughness, and he could pick what giant effect that he got. Also, in those days, of course, you didn't have the second rank fighting, you didn't have step up, and so the giant didn't die, which is the problem he has in 8th edition. He's got toughness 5 and no armor save. Throw him into an infantry unit, chances are he might last 1 round if you're lucky before they kill him. Otherwise, he's going to last 2. He's also very vulnerable to being shot with small arm bowfire, terribly vulnerable to skink blowpipes and things. Vulnerable to most things, I'm afraid. Which means that the fact that his leadership 10 stubborn doesn't really come into play a lot because he just dies. That being said, of course, if you get him into combat, you get jump up and down, 2d6 strength 6 hits. If you get the pick-up attack, he could eat, a level 4 wizard or something. All of this is all possible. It's just a lot rarer than it used to be in previous editions, I think, because the giant just drops so much more quickly in 8th edition than he used to. If you're going to have him, I recommend Nergal as your mark, because that pushes his toughness up to 6. That makes a big difference to his survivability, because it makes strength 4 things, of which common as muck in 8th edition, wound him on 6s instead of 5s. He does do funny things, though. Put him into a monster, put him into something with low initiative, try and get the thump with club for 2d6 wounds. Got that on a steam tank before. That's good, obviously. But, I think he's interesting, the giant. I mean, he's not very good, but your opponent will think about him and will sometimes be wary that things with low initiative, in particular that are monsters, there is some vulnerability there. So he's not completely useless, the giant, with his Mark of Nergal, but at the same time, still largely a fluff choice. I would prefer him to the Shaggoth or the Slaughter Brute, certainly, because he does inject a little bit of unpredictability into proceedings, but sadly, not reliable enough to be good. You then got the Chaos Spawn in rare units. Again, really a legacy to old editions. The Chaos Spawn used to be quite good because an unbreakable thing with strength 5 in 6th ed, where everyone only had strength 3, was really rather good. But now, everyone's got strength 4 or 5, and 2 ranks can fight. And so the Chaos Spawn old stat line, which used to be quite good, is now garbage, fortunately. Is really not very good at all. If you're going to have him, probably use Tzeentch to get the breath weapon on him, and, have a bit of fun with him. Be careful about charging him into, some really plum targets, I once in a game charged a Chaos Spawn into the side of a Bretonnian lance, thinking, ooh, that's very clever. Then the General and the BSB both made way, killed the Spawn, and then were able to turn the lance round and then throw the unit in the rear of my main infantry block, and I lost. Absolute noob mistake, but at the same time, that's what Chaos Spawns can sometimes do. Next one, rare units. Skull Crushers. Yes, yes, yes. Oh, yes. These are on the same shelf as the Chimera, of really nasty things that Chaos players used to destroy you and to make you think, I wish my army was as good as their army. Boo hoo hoo hoo. Can't we play an old edition where Chaos weren't as good? Truth is there aren't any, because Chaos have been good in every single edition. So there. Right, Skull Crushers. This is like a hard khorne bloke riding a juggernaut of khorne. It's got a 1-up armor save. It's got move 7. The rider's got 3 attacks with strength 5 or 6 if you give him lances. 5 probably better. The Ensorcell weapons. And the juggernaut's got 3 strength 6 attacks on the charge. It's like a ton of bricks. And yeah, it's got fear, it's immune to psychology, it's really, really strong for the points. You will see these a lot with Chaos Warriors. They are a very, very mighty unit. They are vulnerable to like the Law of Metal and things that ignore armor, of course they are. But they are strong and they are frenzied, so be careful. They can be baited. I think the thing is with them is that, to be honest, 3 of them, that's enough hitting power. It's only about 220. Don't bother with a command group except for a musician. Champion, not very useful because he's going to get challenged out and then you're going to lose all those attacks fighting like a halberdier champion. Standard bearer, you don't want that because if your juggernauts run, that's that model automatically dead and you should be winning combat anyway with juggernauts. Musician you do want, because if you get pulled out of position, having that musician there might allow your juggers to get in position easily. 2 more monsters then to conclude. One of them is the Slaughter Brute, which is again a really very weak monster, sadly. Just 5 wounds and a 4-up armor save. He's not going to last long. He does take the weapon skill and the leadership of your general. So if you've got a Demon Prince or a Chaos Warrior as your or a Chaos Lord as your general, he's going to have weapon skill 9, which is going to mean a lot of stuff's going to be on 5 to hit him, and leadership 9, which is going to mean he's going to be able to do his own thing there without having to worry too much about leadership-based things. It's not unusable, but it's pretty poor. Similar level to the Shaguth, I think. If you do have a Slaughter Brute, try and make the fact he's got Strength 7 work for you. Try and send him against something where that's got Toughness 5 or something. The Mutualia Vortex Beast is probably the worst, sadly, of all of these choices. Basically, it's a funny monster. It's not very good as a monster, and it has a weird spell that's random. Now, if you get the spell off and it's a bound spell, you can, if your opponent or you roll a 6, make all of the units take a toughness test, and if one of them dies, it becomes a Chaos Spawn. It's nice. Funny if it's 50 Storm Vermin, but you're going to have to roll the dice to get that, and I just think that that's relatively likely. So really, as I say, not a strong pick at all, the Mutualia Vortex Beast. Really a fluff choice. To conclude, ladies and gentlemen, let's just have a look at the spell decks now. Now, if you're using the Chaos God magic, which you may do, it's going to be one of these 3 laws, Tzeentch, Nergal or Slaanesh. Now, Tzeentch, despite being the god of magic, is probably the weakest of the 3 laws. Now, I don't think Tzeentch is as bad as most people seem to think that it is, but it is problematic. It's a pew-pew law. It is all about magic missiles. So, the real problem with Tzeentch is that if your opponent takes damage from Tzeentch, they have to take a toughness test. If they pass it, if they fail it, they take a few extra bit of damage, which is, I guess, good for you. But if they pass it, they get regen 6+, and that stacks. So if you keep firing it like your enemy's main unit, your enemy is going to have 4-up regen in no time, and that's just awful. So you really don't want that. So effectively, the targets for this are going to be small units, monsters, stuff that has got a ward save already, so it's not going to benefit from regen. And that really does harm, the Tzeentch lore quite considerably. As for the spells, well, you've got the blue fire. That's your signature. It's like an upmarket fireball. It does random strength, random hits. That's going to be quite good in a sense because your opponent might fear the worst and so therefore might commit more to dispelling it than he might otherwise do. There's then the Treason of Tzeentch, which I think is a really, really good spell. It's a hex spell, and it means that your opponent is going to lose his Inspiring Presence and his Hold the Ground, and use the lowest leadership value in the unit. This is a thinking man's spell. If you've got like a big unit of trolls that you're facing with a character in there, Treason of Tzeentch on them is going to mean the trolls are going to be testing leadership 4. They're not going to be able to use the general, not going to be able to use BSB. And even if they are steadfast against what you charge in there, they're going to be steadfast on a 4. This is the kind of combo you can use with Treason of Tzeentch where it really, really helps you. It's a nasty little spell. Pink Fire of Tzeentch, this is that gives you an extra breath weapon, really, or it works a bit like a Skaven Warp Wire Thrower used to in the old days. You get like a Teardrop Flame template and then it moves forwards. If you've got Gorach or someone on a disc, and you can get them into the right place, then that's actually quite a nice little spell, but it's quite expensive. You've got to be lucky with it, and you might well be running metal anyway if you've got a Tzeentch Sorcerer on a disc, so it's not great. Bolt of Change, it's like a bolt thrower. It does D3 wounds, D6 strength plus 4. To take out a monster, you're probably going to have to be rolling fairly high on that, get up to maybe strength 7, and you're only doing D3 wounds, but it's alright. It's definitely a spell that's going to kill you some stuff from time to time. Glean Magic, best spell in the lore. That targets an enemy wizard with an 18. You do a wizard level roll-off, so it's good for picking on small level enemy wizards. And if you beat him, you steal his spell. That means he doesn't have the spell anymore, which is good for you, and it means your wizard has got the spell. That's very nice. Pinch like Melkoths from a level 1 wizard. It's kind of funny, you could pinch potentially Orc magic or something, or Skaven magic. Really, really amusing things could happen with this. All this being said, though, by the time you manage to steal it, it might already be, say, turn 3, and you might have enough time to use it properly, and so on and so forth. But it's a nice spell. Tzeentch's Firestorm, that's like a flame storm with random strength and etc. Good if you're facing like a big block of elves. Good if you're facing a big block of Skaven. Otherwise, I wouldn't bother with it, really. And then Infernal Gateway, which is a decent 6 spell. It's a 2d6 strength, 2d6 hits, big magic missile. Most stuff you cast on that with a decent roll is going to be dead. So, that's quite good and relatively cheap for a number 6 spell. It's alright. So there you are with Tzeentch. It's not a bad lore. But it's not a very good lore either, and it's worse than almost all the other ones you pick. Nergal next. Nergal gets more rave reviews than Tzeentch as a lore. I think it's a little bit better, but it's still not great. Its lore attribute means that if you roll a 6 after you cast a spell, you get +1 toughness, +1 wound on your wizard. That's alright. If it's a demon prince, yeah, obviously that's pretty damn impressive. Otherwise, it just makes like a normal wizard a bit harder to kill. It's not that important. Signature spell, Stream of Corruption, is a breath weapon that you can't use in combat. So you've got to be close to your enemy to use it. You've got to get your very immobile Nergal Sorcerer next to your opponent where he can use the Teardrop breath weapon. If you get into that position, it's a pretty good spell, but your Nergal Sorcerer is not going to be in that position very often, so for that reason, at all. Miasma of Pestilence next. That knocks your enemy's weapon skill and initiative down by 1, or potentially D3 if you boost it. It's basically a worst version of Melkoth's, but it's still not a bad spell. Stacks nicely with the Mark of Nergal as well, which your enemy might 6s to hit soon. Blades of Putrefaction gives you poison. Nice. If you're running Festus, even nicer because it goes up to a 5-up. Curse of the Leper, one of the best spells in the game. This is the reason for picking Nergal, really. You get D3 toughness or your opponent loses D3 toughness with an 18. Quite cheap to cast. This is an auto stop pretty much for your opponent. Very strong. Rancid Visitation's next is a magic missile, d6 strength, 5 hits. You take a toughness test, and if they fail, they keep taking them until they pass one. Stacks with Curse of the Leper. One of the other reasons why they're going to want to dispel Curse of the Leper. Fleshy Abundance is an expensive spell, but it gives you regen 5 up, which is useful, and it stacks with existing regen. So that's nice if you've got some trolls, because it only stacks by 1, but you're going to end up with a 3-up regen troll unit. Very nice. Plague Wind is like a Purple Sun of Zurius, but a lot weaker in its effect. It's okay, not a bad spell, but not that great either. Slaanesh. The really, really good lore, I think, here. Some awful things in it and some really, really good ones. My favourite of these lores by far. Lore attribute, Bliss and Torment. If you do damage and then you roll a 6, you get some extra weapon skill, initiative, and attacks. Or very, very marginal lore attribute. Very, very unusual to use that unless you've got a Demon Prince, you know, smashing skulls and he does a Caco bomb, which I'll talk about in a minute, and ends up like, he might end up with another 5 attacks or something for 1 round, you know, which is nice, but, you know, it's relatively situated. Signature spell of Slaanesh is also rubbish, like the lore attribute, the Lash of Slaanesh. Nice name, but not very good. Basically, it does a line, stuff in that line takes strength 3 hit with armor piercing. If you've got yourself on the edge of a flank of some elves, you know, with a Steed of Slaanesh wizard or something, might be okay. Otherwise, not very good at all. Acquiescence, fantastic little spell. One of the best spells in the game, in my opinion. Cast on a 6, gives your opponent always strikes last. Great against elves, of course. But the real thing it does, it gives random movement. So that means that your opponent, all they can do is randomly move d6. So no charges for him. So that means the premier unit that's there, about to do a really good charge on you, Acquiescence, bam, you can't charge. Really, really impressive. Be careful with it though, because your opponent can spin round when they've got random movement and move d6. That means they could hit something of yours that you don't want them to hit. For example, if you run your Chaos Sorcerer on his Steed of Slaanesh up behind him, you do Acquiescence or Cacophonic Choir, which has the same effect. Then you find that your the enemy unit turns round. And yeah, sure, they're not charging your Chaos Warriors, but then they charge your Wizard instead. So, you know, keep your distance from the unit that's got Acquiesced. Purveyne of Slaanesh, 3d6 leadership test, or they take a wound with no armor saves. Nice for sniping champions out of units to stop them challenging your guys. Otherwise, not very useful. Hysterical Frenzy, nice little spell. Also a Thinking Man's spell. Gives you Frenzy, and if you've already got Frenzy, just an extra attack. That includes horses as well. Great on Juggernauts here. Also hilarious. Slaanesh making khorne Juggernauts, all hysterical. So they get like another attack. That and the Juggernaut itself. You can also use it as a hex. So you could use it on an archer unit. Your opponent having to try and charge you. Passing leadership tests to restrain. If your opponent's got a very plumb target, even with a good unit, Hysterical Frenzy on them. Sure, it makes them a bit more killy, but it means they'll have to overrun after they beat you, and that could get them into trouble. Really nice to use these in these ways. Mostly you'll be casting it on yourself, but there are some occasions you might want to cast it on your opponent as well. Slicing Shards. It's just basically an upmarket projectile spell, d6 strength for hits with armor piercing. If your opponent fails the leadership test, they have to take more hits. That stacks with Phantasmagoria, and a little bit like how Advanced Visitation stacked with Curse of the Leper. Phantasmagoria is the number 5 spell. This means leadership tests on 3d6, and they pick the 2 highest, making them more likely to break. This is good against Steadfast, a bit like the death spell Doom and Darkness. Not a bad little spell. And then number 6, whoa, yeah, Cacophonic Choir. This is a fantastic spell. 12-inch range, 2d6 hits that wound on 4+ with no armor saves, and then you get the Acquiescence effect as well, on top of that. And you can bubble it up so that everyone within 12 is affected by it. That is what is known as the Caco bomb. Now, because every single thing within 12 takes it, that means if your opponent's got lots of little units, they're all going to be taking that damage, which is probably going to do about 3 or 4 wounds, 5 wounds or something each per model. That's hideous. And they're going to be acquiesced as well. So you can fly your Demon Prince up if you can get him out of your opponent's arcs, and then try and do a Caco bomb to mess up all his movement next turn. Just be careful that the unit that you don't want doesn't turn around and charge your Demon Prince though with that. But that's the only thing you need to be worried about. So, I hope that was all useful and you enjoy playing Warriors of Chaos in this excellent game, Warhammer Fantasy, that should still continue to be played. Hey, Demon Prince, do you have anything else to say? He's gone. He's gone. He's just gone out without telling me where he's going. How inconsiderate is that? You really know when your relationship's in trouble when your Demon Prince just goes out and doesn't tell you where he's going. Although I guess I did tell him. Oh well. Thank you for listening. Good night.